Here with Wentworth Miller and Sarah Wayne Callies from the hit Fox show Prison Break. How are you doing?
Good, how are you?
Great. Now, the fans of Buddy TV are extremely excited to have Michael and Sarah back together. How easy or difficult was it finding that chemistry again after being gone for a season?
So hard.
Sarah's got her work cut out for her, that's all I'm going to say.
I mean, look at him, for crying out loud.
So you fell back into sort of those old rhythms fairly simply then?
I think as actors we work well together, and I certainly miss Sarah when she was gone. The question is, we've come back to characters who've changed dramatically. Sarah's had her experiences, and Michael has crossed a couple of lines that he probably would not have crossed if he thought that Sarah was still around. You know, when he collapsed that tunnel on his fellow inmate, that was Michael actively arranging someone else's murder. So when you talk about Michael and Sarah getting back together, A, you have to talk about whether these characters can recognize one another, and B, whether they're worthy of any kind of real lasting connection. It's certainly something to fight for.
So then what will, in this new season, how much interaction? Will there be a lot of Michael and Sarah? Will we see them sort of getting back together, reconnecting throughout the season?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think what's, at least, you know, I've seen, I think, 8 episodes worth of script so far. And what's interesting to me is that these are two people who've always had huge, huge, huge boundaries between them. And they've been physical boundaries. And those physical boundaries are now, for the most part, gone. And what they find is that there are still enormous emotional boundaries and psychological boundaries. And what I see is, at this point in the storytelling, I don't quite know myself, and I'm trying to find my true north again. He's in a very similar place. At a certain point, they may start to look more closely at the other person and say, whoa, I don't know if you're the man that I knew. Stronger in some ways, maybe darker in others. I mean, there's a lot of exploration to undergo and very, very little time.
Yeah, that's the real challenge of the Michael-Sarah dynamic, is that it's not a show about a romance. It's a show that has a romance threaded through it. So in between the gunfights and the car crashes, how do these people find each other in a way that's believable and realistic? I still feel that first season was our strongest so far in terms of Michael and Sarah, and they had the context ironed out and their characteristics ironed out. And second season, I felt a little bit like the romance spun out just a bit, because the powers that be didn't decide very clearly and specifically who these characters were going to be to each other on the other side of the wall. But Sarah and I think, are really finding our way as far as that's concerned this season. I feel very, very strongly about the work that we've done so far in these last 8 episodes.
It's also worth just briefly, Michael and Sarah are almost never alone this season. And so in a way, first season, they didn't see each other much, and there were obviously a lot of things between them. But when they were together, they were alone in a room together and could speak relatively freely. Now, we're in a context where you may be having a conversation with someone and there's a room full of people, so how do you, you know, so tell me about your relationship with your father, everyone, you know, it's off.
The other big change this season is that for the first time, Michael's going on the offensive, and he and his team are sort of going after the company. And I was wondering if you could sort of preview what's that going to entail this season, who's involved, what's going to be going down with that.
We like to joke it's a little bit like the A-Team. It's got a little bit of a caperish Ocean's 11 feel, except people are still dying. So it's still very serious. It's still life and death. But I think Michael, Lincoln, Sarah, Sucre, Bellick, Mahone, and a new character, a couple new characters, realize that it's time to stand and fight, that this threat is not going to go away, and that the way to do that is to not focus on the puppets like they have been, Agent Kellerman and Gretchen B. and Whistler, but to go after the puppet master. So we find out a lot more season 4 about who's been pulling the strings so far.
And it's interesting that you mentioned Ocean's 11, because I got a chance to see the first episode, and I felt like exactly that. It looked a lot like that. It's a completely sort of new direction. It's the first season where there's no prison, per se, involved. And so is that, like, how is that different than previous like, how is it different than previous seasons?
I think the prison this season is sort of allegorical in that everybody is wrestling with things in their own lives that they can't seem to escape. Michael, Mahone, Lincoln, Sarah, we're all coming into this season with a tremendous amount of baggage that we've accumulated on the journey of the 3 seasons. And so while they're not behind bars, they're certainly not free, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And then just for Sarah, when everyone thought Sarah Tancredi's head was in a box, there was a lot of fan outpouring of just who were furious, I think, with the show because they loved your character and they loved the interaction with Michael. And what was how did you respond to that overwhelmingly favorable reaction to, no, we can't believe this character is dead, we loved her?
I can't express how grateful I am. I mean, I think often, I don't quite know how to say it, but as an actor, your relationship with an audience is a critical one, but often a silent one. And I started acting and sort of grew up in theater, and as soon as the show is over, they let you know exactly how they felt. And they're either standing and clapping or they're making no noise at all, and you think, I'll go back and I'll work harder and we'll make this right. With television, it's very different because you don't really get a chance to interact with the audience in the same way. And I do very little of the sort of checking out of things online because I find it gets in my head in ways that I don't think are healthy. So I didn't really know the way fans felt, and then they got me my job back. And it's a job I value, working with people who I adore and learn a tremendous amount from.
Mm-hmm. And
Thanks.
then finally, just for Wentworth, because you're incredibly popular amongst, you have a huge rabid fan base. You're the most popular celebrity actually on Buddy TV.
Oh.
And I'm wondering, how do you sort of deal with that overwhelming sort of rabid fan base and these? I'm imagining you have plenty of crazy sort of fan interaction stories.
I don't. Actually,
you do.
I don't. I honestly, a couple times, I've gotten some bizarre gifts on the street, like a pair of handcuffs one time, but with a pillow, which was still sweet. It came from the sweetest person, but. That's the thing, I don't feel particularly overwhelmed, which is great because the show has managed to have its impact, and I love what I do, and I love that it touches people's lives in the way that it does. But in the States in particular, it's a relatively contained, modest hit. It's only when we go abroad, say France or Japan, that's when you feel like a rock star for a day, when it can become very intense. The quality changes. It's actually like the best of both worlds, really, because we get this great exposure and we're part of something that we're proud of, but at the same time we all get to lead our lives as relatively normally as possible.
We've also been, until this season, pretty insulated by being in Chicago and Dallas, I think. LA is a city that's partly about celebrity watching. There's a sort of zoo aspect of it that's very odd. We had paparazzi our first day on set, which was creepy. But I think that's a new thing for us now.
Yeah.
Okay. Wentworth, Sarah, thank you.